before we start, let me show you what we will be building today. So today, guys, we're going to build a really easy phone verification app with Flutter and Firebase. You can see we have this sign in screen here. We also have a sign up screen because sometimes you also want to store additional details for a user, for instance, their name, and that we will store in firestore database. But for phone authentication, we will only use Firebase authentication, and there will be no email and password verification. Everything will happen via phone authentication. So you can see I'm entering my number. If you don't have a Google Play certified app yet, it will sometimes do a RE captcha screen, so we'll also cater for that. Then once the phone verification has been done, you'll receive an OTP or a code via SMS. In our case, we're just using a test code at the moment. And we can say submit and it signs us in. So I will show you how to do all of that, how to create test numbers in Firebase to test with, and also test with an actual device. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm just going to create a new Flutter application by saying Flutter create, and let's call this Flutter phone verification. All right, now once that is done, we will just go into that directory. Now that we've got a blank project here, we want to actually go to Firebase and create our project there. So let's do that now. Let's go to Firebase, and we're going to go to the Firebase console, and we will create a new project here. I'm gonna say add project. We're going to call this. We don't really need Google Analytics now, so I'm going to leave that out. I'm going to say create project. All right, now that the project is ready, we can click continue. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to go to authentication, and we want to enable authentication, so just click on get started. So Firebase might not look exactly the same because they changed their interface a lot, but it will be similar to this. So once you're there, you can go to sign-in methods, click on phone, click on enable, and click on save. So this will enable phone verification. What you also want to do is, in my case, we're going to do this, is you can add a test phone number. So I'm just going to add a test phone number here. And because we're in South Africa, I'm using a +27 test number, and I'll show you why now, but you can use any test number here. Just enter the country code and then the number. I'm just gonna do let's just say 0, let's just say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and the verification code would be 1 2 3 4 5 6. All right, and we're gonna say add. All right, and as you can see here, we now have a test phone number to test with. So this is so that we don't have to test with an actual device and send SMSs the whole time, which could also result in your number getting blocked for a while. The other thing we want to do is we want to go to Cloud Firestore and enable that. This isn't necessarily required. It's just nice to have because we might also want to store additional details of the user. So for now, I'll just start this in test mode. All right, now we've got a database. We've got authentication set up. Now what we want to do is we want to go to our project settings. So for now, let's just add an Android application here. And we have to give it our Android package name. So if we go back to our code here, we can just go to Android app build.gradle, and it should be inside here. There you can see it says com.example.flutter phone verification. So we're just going to use that, and let's just go back. There we go. And we're just going to call this again Android app for now, but this will essentially be our Flutter app. Let's say Flutter Android. Now you'll see here it says debug signing certificate optional. This is actually required for our phone verification, but we won't only need SHA1, we'll also need SHA256 for phone verification, especially if you're doing offline verification. But we'll do this at a later stage. So for now, you can just skip this and say register app. All right, we're not going to download this Google Services file right now. we're just going to say next. Here you can see they give you quite clear instructions on how to add the Firebase SDK to your application. In this case, it will be our Android application inside of Flutter. Then we can just say continue to the console. We can now go back to our Flutter application and continue here. So as you can see, we already have our application deployed here in the terminal. So we used Flutter run and it's running here in our actual device, not an emulator. And here you can see if you just press a little plus button, it will just increment the number on the screen. So that's the default Flutter application, and we don't need any of that. So we'll just delete all of this. So what we'll need is we'll need a login screen. We'll also need a register screen, and this is so that users can sign up. And then we'll also need a logged in screen. So this is for users who is basically logged in, authenticated, and that is kind of where they can be taken once they're logged in. So let's start with the main.dart here. Oh wait, let's first do the register screen here. Logged in screen. There we go. So now we can actually go back to our main screen here, and it's time now to first of all add Firebase to our application. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to Flutter Fire. So if we go to Flutter Fire, this is what we'll be using to use Firebase in our Flutter application. So these are a bunch of plugins created by Google themselves to basically help us integrate with Firebase. So if you go here to the overview, they have a very nice example here of how to get started to initialize your app. And you can either use a future builder or a stateful widget. I'm going to use a future builder, and you can basically just copy and paste this code into your main.dart. So we're going to replace our main.dart with that code. So guys, in our main.dart file, you'll see here that I've already implemented that future builder example that they have. So you can see here I've implemented it almost exactly. I've only added some theme colors here and some basic text here and there, but for the most part it's exactly the same as their example here on flutterbase.flutter.dev. If you go to Flutterfire and you go to the overview, so I've implemented this exactly. And then also what's important is you'll have to remember to add these dependencies to your pubspec.yaml. So that's for Firebase core, for authentication it's exactly the same, and for Cloud Firestore. So you'll see in our pubspec.yaml I've already added that. And then what's very important, the next step is that in order to have phone verification work, if we go here to authentication and you go to phone auth, you'll see that there's a couple of steps here that you'll have to follow for Android, iOS and web. So for this demo I'm only going to initialize the Android part, but you can very easily just add in Xcode push notifications and FCM that will enable phone auth in iOS. In Android it's a little bit more difficult, so you'll have to add these SHA hashes to your code as well, to your Firebase project. So I remember we spoke about that earlier. So in your console you can just run this command keytool-list-v-alias Android debug key-keystore. There's an example of this. If you go follow this example and you click on authenticating your client, you can literally just copy this this code that they have here. You can just copy and paste it into your terminal, and once you do that, if it asks for a key store password and you don't have one, just press enter. Then you'll see it will generate the certificate fingerprints. Now for both the SHA1 and the SHA256 keys, you will have to copy them and you will have to add them in your Firebase project settings, which I have already done here, as you can see. Then you'll also have to make sure that in your build.gradle files, so for instance, in your Android directory inside of Flutter, in your Android directory inside of there's an app directory, and then inside of there, you'll have to download that Google Services JSON file and place it inside of there. So if we go back to Flutter, you'll see this Google Services.json file. You have to download that now, and you have to add it inside of your app directory, inside of Android, inside of your project directory. So inside there, you'll also see, inside that app directory, you'll also see a build.gradle file. Make sure to change this min SDK version to 21, otherwise phone authentication won't work. Also make sure that you have this apply plugin com.google.gms Google Services plugin here as well. This is also very important. And also if you scroll down, make sure you have these 3 lines of code as well as dependencies. This one is Firebase BOM, this one is Firebase Auth, and this one is Android X browser. All of these are required for Firebase phone authentication to work. This X browser, for instance, is when you don't have a verified app on the Play Store and you're just testing locally. It will most probably ask you to do a ARI captcha, and that is where this browser implementation is also necessary. Then if we go to the other build.gradle, which is in your Android directory, to that file, just make sure that it looks exactly like mine. Also, if you go into dependencies here, make sure you have this class path for this com.google.gms dependency, and obviously make sure you have the latest version. And yeah, that's basically that. If you go to your settings with Gradle as well, you can just double check that yours is looking like mine, but it doesn't really need adjustment. And I think that's all that you have to do in terms of all of the build.gradle files and the Google settings and all of that. So now we can go back to our login screen and continue with that. So guys, now we've got our basic login screen here, and as you can see, it's not looking like much at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a login form, and then I'll be right back. Alright guys, so let me just do a hot restart here, and you'll see that I've now added a form here. Basically we just have a phone number, a sign in button, and a sign up button. So if we just go through this code very quickly, we've got basically just our form key, and we've also got a form key for our OTP screen, which we'll get to now. We've got a number controller for our login screen, which is our phone number. We also have one for our OTP controller, which you can't see at the moment, but we'll get there. Then we've got some Boolean values here, just some checks to say, is the form sending or loading or not. This is resend, it's just a check for the OTP to see if we are busy resending or not. Is this a login screen or not? And then the verification code. So I'll explain this in a moment. Don't worry too much about that. Here you can see what we've done here is we've basically said that if we're already logged in. So as you see here at the top, we've obviously initiated our Firebase Auth instance, and now we can use that Firebase Auth to say if auth.current_user, so it will check if there is a current user. If it's not equals to null, then it means we are actually signed in. So in that case, take us to the logged in screen. All right. Then obviously also just normally do a normal init state. We have our dispose method here, which will basically just dispose of our number controller. If we leave this screen, we actually should do the same for the OTP controller. And then we've got our widget build method. So what we do is we basically say, if this is our OTP screen, show that OTP widget, otherwise show the login screen widget. So right now we're basically in the initial state, we're in the login screen. That's why this is login screen is true. So in that case, we're gonna see the login screen, which is what we're currently seeing. We have our normal scaffold with a form inside. Inside that form, we've got a basically two elements: a sign-in button and a phone number number input. So for that sign-in button, you can see here. Let me just go a little bit down here. You'll see this elevated button here. So we basically say if the form is, if our state is currently loading, if it's not loading, show this elevated button, which will then handle our sign-in. And then if it is loading, show this circular progress indicator here. So that's just what we're doing there. Very basic sign up button. And also if you then click on that for that on-pressed method for that button, if you click on the button or you tap on the button, we basically just check the state of the form. If the form is valid, basically if the phone number is filled in, because we have this empty validator for the phone number. If that is filled in, display the snack bar quickly that says please wait, and then we do a wait login. So we'll get to that login method now. That's why it's commented out. Then we also have below that the no account and sign up button, which is basically just some text, and if you click on that, it will take you to the register screen. Then if we are actually signing in, we'll show the OTP screen, but we'll get to that just in a second. So don't worry too much about the OTP screen right now. Then we also have this little display snack bar method here, which basically just displays a snack bar. So right now at the moment, if we type in a number here, let's just say that number that we have as a test number, and we say sign in, you will see that nothing is actually happening at the moment. It just says please wait. And that's because we actually have to handle the login. However, I want to do the login last because I first want to go to the sign up screen and show you the sign up page. So right now, if we tap on sign up, we only see this empty registration form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the sign up screen as well, and then get back to you and show you the progress. Alright guys, so I've created the registration screen, and if I do a hot reload here, I can quickly show you guys how that looks like. So if we click on sign up, it should take us to the register screen. There we go. And there you can see we've got a name and a cell number. Now technically we don't really need to store any of those. I just like to store some user data as well, and I think it's a real world scenario where a lot of times you will have a sign up screen like this where you will be storing user data. So in our case, the name is basically the only unique data we're storing of this user, and I'll show you that now. But for now, let's just quickly go through this code. So again, it's very similar to the sign in screen. We've got a form key for our normal form here, for our registration form. Then we've got an OTP form as well, which we've just copied from the sign in screen. And then we've got some controllers for our text. Again, we've got some states here that we're just managing with booleans now. Again, this is just to test if you can do this a lot better if you want to. So you've got a loading state, again, resend an OTP screen states for the OTP or the code that is sent to you, verification code, which we'll get to, and just a check to see if we're on the OTP screen or if we're on the register screen. And by default, we are on the register screen, so that's why that is true. We've got our dispose methods here and our normal init state here. Again, very similar to our login screen. We've got a little conditional check here in our widget build method to basically just say, you know, if if we're currently on the OTP screen, then show the OTP screen, else show the register screen. So obviously right now the register screen is true, so we're going to see this register screen here. Then what we have here is just a basic scaffold, and this just has got a column with a form in, again exactly the same as the login screen. The only difference here is we have an extra field called name, which in our case is the user's name obviously, and then the cell number, and both of these has got their controllers, so there you can see. And we also just disable them if we're loading this, if we're in the loading state, then this will be disabled. Then let me just go down here. Then we also have a next button, as you can see there, and if we press on that next button, we have this sign up function that we call, which is currently right here at the bottom, sign up. And as you can see, it's just empty at the moment because I want to go through with you guys, go through the logic on that. But also when we click on that, is register becomes false and is OTP screen becomes true. So let me show you what will happen. Normally a user will now type in his name, let's just say Bob, and his cell number 123456789 and if we click next, this is a screen that we'll see when Firebase is actually sending us or has sent us an SMS with the OTP or the code, the verification code that we need to type in. So obviously it's not doing anything now, but this is just to show you, this is the OTP widget that you're seeing here, which I've also created. And basically you can go back and that will take you back to the sign up screen, to the login screen. So that's just a nice to have. Let me just show you that again. So let's just say my name is Bob, cell phone number, and click next, and that will take us to the OTP screen. Obviously we haven't sent the SMS code yet or the OTP code yet. We haven't done any authentication yet. So let's do that now. So let's handle this sign up method here. So obviously we want to sign up, and we also want to use Firebase phone authentication for that. However, we also want to store that user's details. So when we do, when we go into the sign up method, when we tap that, we want to start the verification process or the verify phone number process. So first of all, let's just set our state here, and inside there we'll just say is loading equals true. So that will just put the form in a loading state, obviously. Then because we are from South Africa, we will have a phone number starting with a +27, and you can implement this in any way that you want. You can have like a little drop down next to your phone number for users to select their country code and all of that. I'm just adding that in here manually, and then we want to add the cell phone number which our user typed in, so that will just be .text. I always do a trim as well because that's, I think, best practice if there's any spaces and that sort of thing in. Then what you want to do is we want to actually do the phone authentication. Now if we go back to Flutter Fire here and we go to phone auth, you'll see that there is a method that they provide here for Flutter. Now this would be the same for iOS and for Android. So here you can see we can basically just copy and paste this directly. There's 4 different things here that we have to implement, and that's why it's not as simple as email verification. You have to implement this verification completed, verification failed, code sent, and code retrieval timeout. So there's basically 4 different things here. Verification completed is when, obviously, when the phone number, the code has been sent and the verification has been completed. However, this will only trigger when your phone tries to manually read the code from your SMS. This will only happen on Android devices. So just take note that this is only for SMS, for Android devices that can automatically grab the code from your SMS. So this doesn't always happen. Then verification fails. You obviously have to handle that. Sometimes a number tries to log in too many times and it will fail as well. Code sent will basically will trigger once the code has been sent from Firebase, and then code auto retrieval timeout is basically just a timeout for the auto retrieval. So let's go implement that. And again, I'm just gonna copy and paste their code exactly. So if we look at that first part, what I want to do is say verify phone number, and we can copy that exactly from the Firebase SDK, and you can see it's already implementing that. So we can just do something like this. Okay. So for the first part, the verify phone number, we want to actually pass it our phone number that we have created here from our text input. So we'll do that right here. And just to make things a little bit clearer, I think we can just do something like this. Then verification completed, and you can see as well, it says starts a phone number verification process for the given phone number. This method is used to verify that the user provided phone number belongs to this user. So you can see, so obviously if the verification has been completed, we will get a phone credential. So I just want to add that phone off credential. That is what we'll receive back. And now we can basically, do whatever we want. Because once this has happened, we're obviously already verified, and we can navigate the user to the logged in page. However, in our case, we also want to store some details into the firestore database. So for that, we're just going to do a normal firestore database set query. So I'm just going to do that quickly, and then I'll show you how that looks like. So first of all, what we want to do is, once the verification has been completed, we want to actually sign in the user. So to do that, we're going to say auth.sign in with credential, and we'll use this phone off credential that we received to actually sign in. So we will take that. I just want to make this a variable here and not a class. And we will pass that through to our sign in with credential method here. So once we're signed in, we can then call the then method. The value that we'll actually receive back will be a user, and we can then do something like this. And inside there, we can then do a check to say if, just a double check to say if the user is not equals null, because it will also return null if this failed. So if it's not null, it means we are logged in. So what we want to do then is we want to store our users' details in the firestore database as well. So we want to say await, and to do await, we have to do an async. So we say await, and then we want to call firestore. Again, remember we initiated firestore and fire off. right at the top there. Okay, so don't forget that. So there we've got, and again, this part is not necessary. This part I'm doing now, it's just if you want to store details of your user in the database. So we're going to say collections, and we're going to store that in the user's path. And we're going to say .doc, and we're going to call our logged in user, and we're going to use the logged in user's UID to actually create that document. So that document's ID will be the same as our user's ID. And then we'll set some data inside there. And remember, we're just storing the name. And again, we're using our name controller .text, and we'll just do a trim there. And then also we're storing the cell number. Again, we don't really have to store the cell number because it's part of our current user, but it's nice to perform queries on. So we are also going to store that in our database. And then what we also want to do is we want to make sure that we're not overwriting our user's details. So I want to do a merge. And this is so that if a user accidentally, registers for a second time, we can just merge the details he typed in there. So in that case, I'll just do a set options, and we'll just do a merge through. So after that, once that has been done, we can then just say then, and then inside there, we can just set our state again. Let's just here set state. Okay. And inside there, we just want to say we're no longer loading. So loading is going to be false. We're also going to say we're no longer on the register screen. So that's going to be false. We're also going to say we're no longer on the OTP screen. So that's just setting our state a little bit there. Again, there's a lot of better ways to do this. And then we also want to just do a navigator, and we want to do we want to navigate, but we also want to remove the root. So we're just going to do a navigate.push and remove. And then what we'll do there is our new root will just be a material page root. And we'll just do a normal build context, and we'll navigate the user to the logged in screen. Okay, and I think that's all we have to do. Let's just add a thing there. Now we need a comma there. Just see what its problem is here. So we've got a builder, build context. We've got our logged in screen. I think we need another comma there. So we can say dot catch error, and here we can actually catch the error from Firebase, which is nice. And here we can say something like, for now we can just do something like a debug print, and we can just say error saving user, and we can have something like on error dot just say toString. Okay, so that should be our verification method. All right, so once verification has completed, we will get phone credentials from Firebase, We can then use that credentials to actually sign in. Once we're signed in, we can navigate basically to our logged in screen, and in our case I'm also storing some details in the database. You don't have to do this part. You can just, you know, do whatever you want once you're logged in, but we'll navigate to the logged in screen. Okay, so then just very quickly, after that, let me just see what's going on here. Verify phone number. Let me just fix the syntax here because there's some missing syntax here. I think this should be like this. Okay. And there should be a comma there. There we go. So now if we look at the verification failed, we actually receive a Firebase Auth exception here. And it will be something like, I think we can actually just say something like this. And inside there, we can then handle that error if we want to. Again, I'm just going to say debug print for now, just to say, you know, error logging in with the actual message from Firebase, which should then be error.message, which will return a string. And then yeah, we should also just say is loading equals false, and we should just do that inside of a set state. Then for the code sent, this is an interesting one. So here you can see it will actually send us the verification ID, and you can see here exactly it's going to send us a string and an integer. So the string will be the one will be the verification ID, the other one will be the resending token. So what we can do here is we can just receive this, and again this code you can just copy from the Flutter Fire website. If we go here to phone Auth, you can just copy these examples from here, as you can see here. So in our case, with the code sent, we just have the verification ID and the force resending token. And here we will handle this if we want to. In our case, again, we're just going to set the state. So we'll say is loading is false, but very important here, we actually have to grab that verification ID. Just see what it's moaning about here. Oh, okay. And yeah, we actually have to save that verification ID. So I'm just going to say verification code equals verification ID. So now we're actually storing that code that Firebase sent us back. So this is basically Firebase saying, we did send you the code. This is the actual code that it has to be. And we're storing that. So we're going to check if the code that the user enters in the OTP screen matches this code that we receive from Firebase. So we actually do check for that as well. And then the last part is just the auto retrieval timeout. So here there will again just be a string here, and if you look at this, it will have that code auto retrieval timeout starts a phone number verification process for the given phone number. Again, if the verification timed out, you can handle it here as well. So in our case, again, we're just getting the verification ID. And we'll just say is loading equals false again. And again, we're copying that code that we get from Firebase. So this is, again, if it resends the value, the code. All right. And then for the last thing here is, let me just double check here. We should actually handle the timeout. And here you can see you can force resending token. There's a lot of stuff you can set here. Auto retrieved SMS code for testing. In our case, we're just going to handle the timeout, and we're just going to say it's going to be a duration of 60 seconds. So that's how long you would have to then also type in the code. Okay. So that being said, I think that's everything that we have to do. And then we can just actually run this method here. So we can just then say, once everything has been defined here, we can just say await and verify phone number. So this should actually work now. And you will see inside of our code, we already have 2 places where we run this. Just check here. Okay. So the first place where we do this is if we click on the sign up button. So let's just go there quickly. If you click on the next button, if you click on this next button, it will then actually run this verify phone number method. It will then prompt Firebase to send us a code and do phone authentication or phone verification. Then it will send us a code. We will then have the opportunity to enter the code. That we will do on our OTP screen right here. Then once we've entered that, you'll see that again we're doing that same sign in with credential method that we have at the bottom there. But in this case, we basically get that verification code from the one that we've set, that we've gotten from here below. So just to go through that again, I know it can be a little bit confusing. First of all, we're going to register the user. We're going to type in the name, the cell phone number, click next. Once we click next, the sign up method will run here. This will do the actual verify phone number method from Firebase. This will send us a code. Once that code is sent, Firebase will also send us the actual code that it sent out. We will then store that inside this verification code method. Once that is done, we will have the opportunity to enter that code we received via SMS inside of this OTP field that we have here. And then inside that OTP field, we do a check. Once we click on that button, we then do a check to say we pass that verification ID through because we've saved that verification code. So we pass that through as the verification ID in this sign in with credential method that we're doing here. And then the SMS code is the code that the user types inside of the OTP field. So we pass both the verification code that we got from Firebase, and we also passing the code that the user typed in. So if that completed successfully, a phone auth provider credential will then be created, and we'll use that to sign in, and we'll have the same sign in method as below. So we'll basically store our user's details in the database, and we'll redirect the user to the login screen. So we can actually test and see if that's working now. However, we don't have a login screen set up correctly yet. So let's just do that quickly. So if we go to our logged in screen here, we basically just have a empty screen. So again here, I'm just going to create a logged in screen quickly and then show you how that looks like. So just give me 1 second here. Alright guys, so now we also have a logged in screen, and here you can see it's the same as our other screens. It's a basic scaffold. However, once we're actually on that screen, you'll see here there's a text that shows welcome and then the username, which is a variable that we just have here at the top, which is empty. And then we'll also display the user cell number, which in this case, because we're logged in, we can just call auth.currentuser.phone number. This auth is been initialized here at the beginning of this screen here. And then the same with the user ID. We're also printing out the user ID. So we say auth.currentuser.uid. And then we're obviously getting the user's name from the database. So in our init state method here, we've got a little get user function. And if we go down below, you'll see we've got a future method that's basically for the get user that basically just calls the firestore database, and it just checks the user cell number. Now, because we've added that in Firebase, in the authentication part of Firebase, it actually stores that +27 part of our number as part of the number. So what we do is we basically just say, once we're logged in, we basically just say, okay, let's take that phone number, let's remove that +27. So that's what we're doing here. We're doing a substring on the first 3 characters. So we're copying everything past the first 3 numbers, which is that +27. And we're basically copying the rest of the cell phone number, but we're just adding a 0 at the front because Firebase also strips away the 0. So then we've got our cell number supposedly that's stored in the database, and we can just query that by saying firestore.collection.users where cell number is equals to this cell number that we get from the logged in user. And if we get that user, if there's results, we can then pull the username, the user's name from that results. There should only be one, so that's why I'm just saying result.docs, taking the first result from the array.data and the name value. So that will then return us our name. Again, this isn't necessary if you don't want to store user details. That will then return our username, and once we get that, it will fill that in automatically in here because we have a set state method there. We also have the sign out method that will just handle our sign out. So it's just very easy to just say auth.signout from Firebase. Once that has been done, we then just do a navigator.push and we take the user back to the login screen. Okay, so that works very well. Then we just need to go back to the login screen and finish our actual login method, because if you remember correctly, we haven't actually finished that. So I'm quickly going to do that. Alright guys, so I've added the login method here, and what you'll see is I've copied this exactly from the register screen. So the entire process that I've just explained to you from the register screen, I've exactly copied that from the register screen, and we're just reusing it here on the login screen. So the only difference is between the register screen and the login screen is we're not actually adding a user into the database. However, what we are doing is we are going to check on the login screen if that user exists, because we don't want to log in a user, or we don't want to use this phone verification method if a user doesn't exist. You can do it that way. It's just it's just not very, I would say, not very usability friendly. So I think it's better to just store that user's details in the database and then check if that user exists. If the user doesn't exist, we want them to sign up. So even though it will work if you just do a sign in with the number, it will actually create a new user in Firebase, but it will break the flow of our application. So when we do a login, again, I've already explained all of this in the register method. The only difference is we also here check if that user exists. So we basically take that logged in, that phone number that the user entered. We then do a query in Firestore to say if the cell number is equal to the number that the user just typed in. Then let me just see here. Just so if that is the case, then we actually have a valid user. If the results is more than 0, then we actually have a valid user here. Then we basically say, then we do that whole thing that we just did with the register, the same thing with same process with the sign-in, exactly the same process. So we use that same verify phone number method with all of the different callbacks. Again, the only difference is once we're signed in, we navigate directly to the logged in screen. We don't register or add anything to the database like we did with the register screen. The rest is exactly the same, and that's basically it. And here you can see there's a little if statement. So if we go up to the top here, if we have a valid user, then we can do this verification. If we then we can sign in the user. But if that user does not exist, so this wouldn't be true, then we just display a little snack bar to say number not found, please sign up first. So this should work 100%. So let's quickly test that. So now if we just do a auth restart here, let me just see what that error is. Register screen dart 18. Let's just go there. That's not necessary. I don't know where that's coming from. Okay, cool. So now we can just do a Shift R to do a auth restart. And let's quickly test that. So remember we created that test number. So we can do a sign up first, because if we go back to our Firebase console and we go to our authentication, you'll see that there's no users currently. So what we'll do is we'll register a new user here. We'll call it Bob Smith. And the cell number, we'll use our cell number that we've created. So again, just to show you, here in sign-in methods phone, we have created this number here. So let's just go back and we will sign in with this number. Can't remember if it had to have the 0 in front of or not. Well, we'll find out. So let's say next. And now it's going to send an SMS OTP to that number. Now in our case, it's going to do this reCAPTCHA check, and this is where that SHA key was necessary for, and that browser implementation that we did. Now we're going to add this 123456 code that we added and say submit. And there you can see it says welcome Bob Smith. It's logged us in. Now if we refresh this page here, the authentication page here, you'll see that we'll have a valid user here. The number has been stored there. We've got a user ID which starts with IOH, and you can see here on the screen that is correct. And now also if we go to our cloud firestore, and this is the part that I said wasn't necessary, but it's a nice to have. You now have your users collection here with that user's ID and some details of that user with his name there, Bob Smith. And now we can sign out from the app. And again, from this login screen, we can try to log in with that same number. Again, here, if we type in a random number, like let's add some more numbers there, and we say sign in, it does that check for if that user exists, if it's a valid user or not. So in this case, it's not, and it's not going to work there. But if we just enter the number like that and we say sign in, let's just see what happens. Just see why that's not working. Let's just go back. Oh, I know why that's not working. It's because we didn't look up the login buttons here. We didn't uncomment them. So obviously on both parts, the OTP resend code, and then also on the sign in button, so that's this button here, there's also a login there. So if we just do a if we just do auth restart there, we can then try again. So if we type in a random number and we say sign in, again it does that check. And there you can see number not found. But if we type in a correct number for a valid user and we say sign in, it should sign us in. But first it does the phone verification. And again, if you have a verified Google Play app, it won't actually show you that RE captcha. Here we type in the code that we've set up previously. Again, this code you will receive via SMS if you have a valid number. Okay, and there you can see it says welcome Bob Smith. So it's working, and that's basically everything you need for this to work properly. We can also try this with a valid number. I'm not sure if my number will work because it was blocked previously because I tested too much, but let's try. Dave Smith, just as an example, and I'll use my actual cell number here. Obviously, I'll just block this out. Let's see if this works. If I say next, I don't know if they have unblocked me yet. We'll see now. And we should receive a SMS code here. Yeah, there you can see they have already unblocked me. So I've just received that SMS code here, and I can just copy that. So that is 686963, 686963, submit. And that will actually take us to the, let me just double check, 686963, 686963. I typed it in wrong. And there you can see, welcome Dave Smith. Well, I'm logged in and I can sign out. And there you have it. So that's both examples with a test code and a actual phone number. And I hope you guys found this useful. It's quite a lot of steps that you have to take and a lot of things that you have to do extra when you want to do phone verification. But at the end of the day, it's much easier for your users to sign in with and sign up with. So at the end of the day, it's easier for your users, but more difficult to implement, where if you do something like email verification, email and password, it's easier to set up for yourself as a developer. It's easier to implement, but it's a little bit more difficult for a user, I would say. But yeah, this is basically the steps involved for doing phone verification. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope you guys found this useful, and see you guys next time. Goodbye.